Hope Diamond is unique in a lot of different ways. Certainly, the human history surrounding it is what most visitors know about when they come here to see the diamond.
Oh, it's just so pretty.
The Hope Diamond is indeed one of the world's most extraordinary gems, a blue diamond of great rarity and greater beauty. After 300 years of intrigue, of revolutions, personal misfortunes, and tragedies, the Hope Diamond now belongs to the American people, and its appeal has not diminished.
I think it's beautiful. I think it's beautiful. I think it's stunning, and it's beautifully set, and I love the way they've mounted it.
Oh, it was gorgeous.
It was so pretty.
It really was.
It was huge. It was very big.
It's beautiful. Just absolutely gorgeous. No, I'd love to see it on my neck.
For the last 40 years, the Hope Diamond sat in a stark wall vault here at the Smithsonian's National Museum of Natural History. But since the summer of 1997, visitors have been treated to a new experience in viewing the Hope, featuring a high-tech and high-security glass case that seems almost like a shrine. Lit by fiber optics, the beautiful 45.5-carat diamond can now be appreciated as never before, says the Hope's modern-day guardian, Smithsonian curator Jeffrey Post.
You can get closer to it, you can see the color, you can see the brilliance of the stone, something that you couldn't see before.
The Hope draws tremendous crowds. Each year, between 6 and 7 million people view the diamond, making it perhaps the most visited museum piece in the world. Surrounded by 16 white diamonds and suspended from a platinum chain of 46 additional diamonds, the Hope's new home is the Harry Winston Gallery, named for the New York jeweler who donated it to the Smithsonian in 1958. During his lifetime, Harry Winston refused to be photographed, citing insurance and security concerns. Winston's son Ronald continues the tradition of not allowing himself to be photographed, but he agreed to talk as long as our camera was pointed away.
Well, with all the crazy people in the world, I think it's better to stay behind the business, and of course I'm not supposed to be photographed. I appreciate not being.
The new Hope Diamond display is the centerpiece of a $13 million renovation of the Smithsonian's Hall of Gems and Minerals, financed entirely by private donations, including $1 million from the Harry Winston Research Foundation.
It's not often that a son can do things like that for his father. His father's done the great thing of giving this gift, and then to have it enshrined in this little gallery, like a little pantheon in his honor, and we were allowed very graciously by the museum to have his bust, a little bit of the story of his life, and a photograph, so it kind of rounds out the cycle, if you will.
Safe manufacturer Diebold donated the new display case with 3-inch glass walls. Security cameras abound, some set in a replica of the Smithsonian Rotunda above the case.
He's probably now better protected than the Constitution.
There are many gems in the world larger than the Hope, like the magnificent 68-carat Victoria Transvaal diamond, but carat for carat, perhaps none more valuable than the Hope.
First of all, the diamond, I think, is the most concentrated piece of value on the planet. There are things worth more, but very little can you hold in your hand worth, say, $200 million.
But some feel it's impossible to place a dollar figure on such a famous gem as the Hope.
It's always been the policy of the Smithsonian Institution that for security reasons, we don't talk about the value of our pieces. And I think any speculation on price is really speculation. And I think it's just one of those few objects in the world that it's impossible to put a price tag on.
To truly understand the value of this extraordinary blue diamond and how it attained its fabled curse, we must journey back to its origins in ancient India. To get an idea of its age, since the Hope Diamond was formed over 1 billion years ago, oceans have opened closed, and opened again. Born 100 miles beneath the surface, then suddenly forced through the Earth's crust by a volcanic eruption, the large piece of crystallized carbon we know today as the Hope was found in the famed Golconda region in central India. It is thought that the historic Kollur mine produced this remarkable gem sometime in the mid-17th century. At the time, India was the sole producer of diamonds in the world, and the discovery of a giant 112-carat deep blue diamond undoubtedly captured the attention of the foremost traveler of his time, French gem merchant Jean-Baptiste Tavernier. It is unknown what Tavernier paid for the future Hope diamond, but by the 1700s, diamonds were long a valued commodity. Even uncut, their beauty was extraordinary. Early in their history, diamonds were believed to possess magical powers. Many legends surround them and their appeal.
I think the appeal of glitter is a fundamental neurobiological phenomenon, and you find sometimes that termites bring up glittering stones in the earth and put them in front of their termite burrows because it appeals to them. In fact, geologists sometimes, when they're looking for sources of minerals or gems, often dig into these termite mounds to see what's in there, what the termites themselves have collected.
Perhaps because diamonds are the hardest natural substance known to man, the people of ancient India believed the stones had the power to make them invincible. They used them to adorn their statues to ward off evil. Some believed the large blue diamond bought by Tavernier was stolen from the eye of a statue of the Hindu goddess Sita, and therefore forever cursed.
It's interesting that the first reference made to the diamond having supposedly come from an idol's eye, from the eye of an idol, was really in this century. Some books that were written, early movies that were done about the Hope Diamond that went into a quite embellished story of where the Hope Diamond probably came from. And in fact, the curses and everything seem to originate about this time.
It is doubtful that Tavernier stole the huge blue gem, as dramatized in the Hope Diamond Mysteries, a serial from the 1920s starring Boris Karloff. Drawings of the Tavernier diamond don't match known shapes preferred for idols' eyes. Tavernier had legally bought many valuable gemstones in India previously and was a favored visitor of numerous heads of state. In fact, Tavernier's fame prompted his own ruler, France's Louis XIV, the Sun King, to invite the colorful world traveler to court in 1668, according to author Suzanne Steinem Patch.
Oh, I think Tavernier went to see him to sell them because Louis XIV was known to be a collector of jewels, and he had a great many before then.
Tavernier's catalog of gems presented to King Louis listed before all others the large 112-carat blue diamond from India. The diamond was cut Indian style, which emphasized size rather than brilliance. It seemed to fit the king's personality. He was, after all, the most powerful and opulent monarch Europe had seen since the Roman Empire. His lavish palace at Versailles was testament to that power.
Oh, he wore a lot of diamonds. In fact, there are some descriptions of him, being adorned for special occasions, literally covered with diamonds, with diamond buttons, with literally hundreds of diamonds covering his garments. And so clearly he was a king that liked to show off his wealth and show off his diamonds.
King Louis XIV paid the equivalent of several $100,000 today for the blue stone plus hundreds of smaller diamonds. Thanks in part to Tavernier, the crown jewels of France became the finest collection of gems in the world at that time, and no other historical figure has likely matched the amount of jewels worn at one time as the Sun King. In gratitude, King Louis awarded Tavernier a title of nobility. Tavernier bought a barony in Switzerland, lived in grand style, and wrote his memoirs. But some would later believe he became the first victim of the curse.
For some reason, people came up with a story that he was, in a return visit to India, that he was attacked and ripped apart by wild dogs, and that's how he met his demise.
It made for a great curse story, but for the record, it never happened. Jean-Baptiste Tavernier died much less dramatically after catching cold while sailing down the Volga in Russia at the ripe old age of 84.
And in fact, he died, living quite well off after all of his sales of diamonds to French kings. And so there really doesn't seem to be any evidence to support that his life was at all cursed. In fact, it was a fairly good life.
A good life, yes, despite the fact that he was reportedly defrauded of a small fortune by a nephew before he died. Perhaps Tavernier was indeed the first victim of the supposed curse of the Hope Diamond. Here was originally over twice its present-day size. After purchasing the 112-carat blue diamond from Jean-Baptiste Tavernier in 1668, King Louis XIV had it cut down to 67 carats, sacrificing size for brilliance.
And we have some reference to the fact that King Louis XIV would wear it suspended on a ribbon-type pendant for special ceremonial occasions. At this point, it became known as the French blue, or the great French blue diamond of the realm.
Many have wondered what happened to the French blue's leftover 55 carats after it had been cut down. Some have speculated that the French blue yielded both the Hope and a smaller blue diamond called the Brunswick blue, but this seems unlikely.
Well, there is a conception, I think, that when you cut a diamond, what you have left are other little diamonds, but in fact, in large part, what you have left is diamond dust.
Those who enjoy the legend of the curse of the Hope Diamond often mix fact and fiction as they trace its path through history. It is true that Louis XIV died a lingering death from gangrene, but such a demise was not unknown in the 17th century. And there is no evidence that Louis's famous mistress, the colorful Madame de Montespan, ever wore the French blue before she was dropped as his lover and banished from court. When the French blue was passed down to King Louis XV, he had it mounted in a royal decoration recognizing chivalry called the Order of the Golden Fleece.
And this piece of jewelry would be one that would be worn on ceremonial occasions by the king, and only by the king. It was a man's piece of jewelry.
It is therefore unlikely that Louis XV's mistress, the Countess du Barry, ever wore the French blue, as legend has it. But perhaps mere proximity brought bad luck. The Countess lost her head, literally, during the French Revolution. However, there is no doubt what fate met the next owner of the French blue. By 1789, King Louis XVI and his consort Marie Antoinette had infuriated the impoverished people of Paris with their lavish spending and parties. On July 14, 1789, as a mob stormed the Bastille, Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette were ordered to leave Versailles for a Paris prison. They briefly escaped to the French countryside, taking their jewels, including the French blue, with them. But freedom was short. Upon their recapture, they were brought back to Paris and eventually marched to the guillotine.
One of the prominent parts of the curse story is that the reason that Queen Marie Antoinette met her demise at the guillotine during the French Revolution is that, of course, she wore the French blue diamond, and its curse did its dirty work on her.
Well, if you want to believe in the curse, believe that her husband wore it and his wife got beheaded.
The French crown jewels, including the blue, were locked up in a museum, where the public was allowed to view these symbols of the unfeeling monarchy. This decision may have led to one of the most incredible jewel thefts in history in September of 1792.
And it was an amazing theft. It took place over a period of about 5 or 6 days, night after night, and the number of thieves apparently got bigger and bigger every night, going in and plundering the treasury.
As many as 50 thieves and their girlfriends ate and drank during their all-night raids on France's treasures. This comic sight had tragic consequences. Nearly all of the crown jewels, valued at 30 million francs, were stolen. And the French blue? Some believe the thieves sold it down on the banks of the Seine. It would remain lost for the next 20 years. That such a famous diamond could disappear so completely has added to its legend. One theory has it that the Spanish royal family bought the gem, citing as evidence a painting by Goya. But this portrait of Maria Luisa shows a stone much larger than the French blue. When the blue did turn up in England, it was conveniently just 2 days after a 20-year statute of limitations the French government had established for crimes during wartime. In effect, whoever possessed the French blue was now its legal owner.
I think now most people who've thought about the history of the Hope Diamond are comfortable with the idea that whoever acquired this diamond after the theft from the French crown jewels sat on it for the 20-year period of time so that they could then reintroduce it into the diamond market as the new legal owner of the diamond and not fear any sort of prosecution from the French government.
Most believe the French blue found its way to English royalty, to the diamond-loving sovereign King George IV. Though some dispute the king's involvement, reference books do refer to a fabulous blue diamond being in his possession. Historians note that this blue diamond was 44.5 carats, or 45.5 carats using modern-day measurements, the exact measurements of the present-day Hope diamond.
King George obviously had some financial problems. He died a relatively early death, and so if you believe in curses, I guess you could chalk that up on the side of the ledger that supports the curse.
The elusive French blue then disappeared again for several years before finding the family that gave it its ironic name of Hope. Around 1830, Henry Philip Hope, whose distinguished banking family helped the United States make the Louisiana Purchase, bought the French blue from London diamond merchant Daniel Eliasson for the equivalent of around $90,000 today. The blue treasure, nearly 200 years removed from India, would forevermore be known as the Hope Diamond. The Hope family would help make the diamond famous. A second-generation Hope, Henry Thomas, displayed the diamond at London's Crystal Palace exhibition in 1851, at which gems belonging to Queen Victoria were also shown. A third Hope, Lord Francis, inherited the gem in 1887. A new chapter for the Hope began when he married an American actress named May Yohe in 1894.
It's amazing how much the blue diamond intertwines people's lives, even when it doesn't, because she, at best, wore it twice, but she had a replica made to use in her stage performances.
May Yohe had much to do with perpetuating and embellishing the legend of the curse of the Hope Diamond. She ghost-wrote a book about the gem from which the Hope Diamond Mysteries short film series was based. Through 15 episodes, fact and fiction blurred into one fantastic story.
Looking back in history prior to that book and to May Yohe's connection with the Hope Diamond, there is no mention that I'm aware of any sort of curse or bad luck or any of these other stories. It seems to be really a 20th century creation.
However, Lord Francis Hope and Lady May did contribute personally to the cursed stories. When May left Lord Francis for another man, her new lover secretly sold her remaining jewelry. Later, she refurbished an inn in New England and called it the Blue Diamond for good luck. But it burned to the ground soon after opening. Once of a privileged class, May Yohe spent her final years nearly penniless. Lord Francis Hope's gambling debts forced him to sell the diamond. Soon after, he accidentally shot himself in the leg, which had to be amputated. Lord Francis later remarried, but his wife died tragically young. The gem was dubbed the Diamond of Disaster in the press of the day, and the rumor mill started working overtime.
Well, as people like to say now, everyone who has privately owned the Hope Diamond has died.
In 1901, the Hope sailed to its new owners, Joseph Frankels and Sons, a New York diamond firm. In the next few years, a series of bizarre and sensational events were said to have occurred. A French gem broker named Collot supposedly went insane and committed suicide after purchasing the Hope. Newspapers then reported the gem in the possession of a Russian prince who loaned it to his lover, a Folies Bergère actress named Laurence Ledoux. She was killed the next day on stage wearing the stone, reportedly gunned down by the prince. The Hope's path of destruction supposedly led to a Greek gem dealer who is said to have died in a car accident after selling the diamond to the Sultan of Turkey, Abdul Hamid II. There is nothing to corroborate any of this except for the fact that the Sultan of Turkey, known as Abdul the Damned, did certainly exist, and he was a collector of fine jewels. He wore this emerald casually on his belt buckle, and some believe he acquired the Hope for a favored member of his harem.
Clearly is some confusion about whether or not this diamond was ever in Turkey and owned by the Sultan Abdul Hamid or not. The documentation that we have seems pretty good, has a pretty clear chain of ownership from the time it went from Francis Hope until it went to Pierre Cartier.
Was the Hope worn in a harem before finding its way to famed jeweler Pierre Cartier? The blue diamond's journey to Paris, to Grande Dame Evelyn Walsh McLean, and to parties with presidents is one of the best stories yet. Light better than any other precious stone, and a rare deep blue diamond, especially the world's largest, can attract much more, even a curse of bad luck for its owners.
I think people kind of want to believe in curses or want to believe in the mysterious.
In the early 1900s, the Hope diamond was beginning to take on the reputation as the diamond of disaster. Though much of the supposed curse was based on half-truths, enough real bad fortune had befallen those who owned the stone to give prospective buyers pause. Such was not the case with Evelyn Walsh McLean, says McLean friend and confidant Hope Ridings Miller.
Her feeling was that if you liked it, it would be all right. Maybe some people didn't, and it wouldn't be good for them, but it was good for her. She loved it.
Evelyn Walsh McLean's father went from prospector to millionaire after a lucky strike in a Colorado gold mine.
So they went from this 2 or 3 room house in Colorado to a 50 or 60 room house, all in the span of a couple of years.
Evelyn Walsh was raised in a manner befitting a princess. In 1908, she married Edward McLean, the spoiled son of the owner of the Washington Post. The newlyweds honeymooned in Europe and the Mideast on a budget of $200,000, $100,000 gifts from each set of parents. The money ran out after just 3 months.
Because it never occurred to her that she was overdoing anything. She was actually a very charming woman. You would have adored her. Well, I thought her charm came from her being so natural and having all that money. You know, it was such an unnatural place to be. But she said, I don't know, it's just part of her.
According to writer Gary Cohen, working from recently discovered transcripts, McLean told the ghostwriter of her autobiography that she first saw the Hope diamond in Turkey in 1908 while still on her honeymoon, worn around the neck of a 300-pound concubine in the harem of Sultan Abdul Hamid II.
She said she saw what she called a fatty, wearing this blue diamond. She didn't know she'd end up owning it at the time, she just noted it.
The documentation is inconclusive whether this was the Hope. If it was, believers of the curse are quick to note that the Sultan later died in exile after the overthrow of his government. By 1910, however, the documented owner of the Hope was indeed French jeweler Pierre Cartier. On Evelyn Walsh McLean's trip to Paris that year, she was met in her hotel room by Cartier, who had previously sold McLean the 95-carat Star of the East. He knew that Evelyn believed that bad luck objects were good luck for her. Sensing a sale, he played up the cursed stories and exhibited the touch of a master salesman.
Mrs. McLean described Pierre Cartier as almost being like a magician as he unwrapped this parcel. In the end, out popped the famous Hope diamond. And she later described to a friend the fact that her fingers were itching as she picked it up.
But Evelyn didn't care for the setting and never even asked the price. Cartier, however, didn't give up easily. He had the Hope quickly reset into a diamond chain and pendant. On a trip to Washington, D.C., he dropped in on McLean at one of her several area estates.
And handed her the diamond and said something like, well, you know, keep it around the home this weekend, wear it, you know, see if you like it, and we'll talk again on Monday, and literally left it with her for the weekend.
She stayed up all night with this stone, and somewhere shortly before dawn, she began to want it. And by the time the sun came up, she knew she had to have it. And so she did.
Cartier's salesmanship worked. McLean purchased the Hope for $180,000, but attached to the bill of sale was an unusual addendum.
There was a letter in Evelyn Walsh McLean's papers where Cartier promised that if any bad fortune should happen to Evelyn Walsh McLean or any member of her family, then Cartier would take the diamond back and exchange it for another jewel.
At first, Evelyn wouldn't let her children or friends touch the Hope. She took the blue diamond to a priest to have it blessed. Just as he blessed it, she wrote later, without any wind or rain, this tree right across the street was struck by lightning. McLean added, "My maid Maggie said, 'Mary, Jesus, and Joseph,' and fainted dead away." From that day on, Evelyn wore the diamond as a lucky charm, and for a brief time, hers indeed was a charmed life.
In one house, we found the payroll, and she had 46 servants on a weekly payroll, including a full-time fireman and 2 full-time dishwashers. This was when she was entertaining 2,000 people twice a week, having 3 orchestras, and she had fun.
Guests included most of the House and Senate.
She just had everybody important in town. Oh, they just loved to go. They were the best parties ever given here, in my opinion. I thought she was a darling person, a kook, you know. But of course we loved those in Washington.
March 4th, 1921, Warren G. Harding took the oath of office as the 29th president.
The McLeans had long been intimates with Washington's political elite, including President Warren Harding and his wife Florence, and Evelyn was frequently photographed wearing her new blue diamond.
Hope Diamond became her symbol, her icon, especially in society. It was something that she was well known for.
Well, I think the more you see, the more it was talked about, the more valuable it was. And I think Cartier was aware of that. I think she was aware of it, and everybody who saw it was aware of it.
Evelyn loved to wear the Hope on its diamond-studded chain, along with the Star of the East on another necklace, plus diamond earrings, clips, and bracelets. When a designer balked at adding more diamonds to one of Evelyn's already oversized pieces, saying no lady would consider it, she replied good-naturedly, "Damn it, I'm no lady. Put on some more diamonds."
I see it from her point of view, because if she wanted to make a statement, this is her way of always being remembered. Maybe she achieved that kind of immortality. Maybe it wasn't a curse after all for her. Maybe it was a blessing. She was a show-off, and she was an exhibitionist. And what better way than to have this cursed diamond?
Perhaps Evelyn began to think twice about the curse of the Hope Diamond. In 1919, her 9-year-old son Vincent was knocked down in the street by a car traveling barely 10 miles per hour. He seemed unhurt, but evidently had struck his head on the pavement. Later that day, he lost consciousness and was dead by sunset. Evelyn coped with her loss, aided by alcohol and morphine. In 1933, her husband, Ned, who had a severe drinking problem and a habit of extramarital affairs, lost the Washington Post to bankruptcy. And her lavish spending, coupled with the Depression, had eaten away at her millions.
Of course, she had no sense about money at all. You see, she just always had so much. And she always said, I didn't bother about it because I knew as long as I had the Hope, I could always, you know, sell it. Sew it and hawk half the time.
Many a time that she would travel from Washington to New York by train with the Hope Diamond and her other jewels tucked into her corset. go to the pawn shop in New York, get her money, go back to Washington, pay her bills, and throw another wild party.
Through all of her hardships and tragedies, McLean held on to the Hope Diamond, and in the years ahead, it would not leave her hands quietly. By 1936, the Hope Diamond had been in the possession of Evelyn Walsh McLean for 25 years. During that time, she had lost her son in a car accident, her husband to other women and alcoholism, her husband's newspaper to the auction block, and much of her fortune. Yet she held on to the hope.
That was something that she had that nobody else had, you see.
McLean probably did more than any single owner to enhance the legend of the gem. She loved to be outrageous and is said to have greeted visitors to her homes attended by her Great Dane Mike, with the famous Hope Diamond dangling from the dog's collar.
I think she really was focused on her good times and her fun. And so what better way than to go around town, have your dog wearing this blue diamond.
When World War II came, Evelyn thoughtfully donated her huge mansion at 2020 Massachusetts Avenue to the Red Cross. From her last Georgetown home, named Friendship after one of her lost estates, she hosted lunches for injured veterans.
She served steak and beer. Her servants had saved up their ration coupons to provide butter, and she would let them play catch with the Hope Diamond using their arms and legs, their artificial limbs. And I think even when she knew she was broke, she always found money or time or a reason to let these vets at Walter Reed Hospital have one afternoon they'd always remember.
In 1941, Evelyn's husband, Ned, died in an insane asylum, his brain atrophied by alcohol saturation. But Evelyn's final heartbreak was just ahead.
Bride and groom, Senator and Mrs. Robert R. Reynolds. The bride is the daughter of Mrs. Evelyn Walsh McLean, owner of the Hope Diamond. Senator Reynolds, a North Carolina Democrat, is 57 and has been married 4 other times.
3 months later, McLean's 19-year-old daughter, also named Evelyn, shocked her mother by marrying the man her mother had been dating.
Today, it's time out for romance.
5 years later, the younger Evelyn died of an overdose of sleeping pills.
Clearly, one could look at her own life and say, you know, this could be some evidence for a curse on this diamond. And I think she started to wonder herself whether this diamond had some influence on her life, and that perhaps maybe there was something to these stories.
Evelyn never recovered from the loss of her daughter. She died of pneumonia in 1947.
She had a sad, sad life. And I thought it was so wonderful that, that she did make so much of her life when she had so much sadness.
People argue, would she have had these bad things happen to her even without the Hope Diamond? And I guess that's something no one can ever tell.
2 years later, in 1949, Evelyn's heirs sold the Hope Diamond to pay off estate taxes. New York jeweler Harry Winston reportedly paid over $1 million for her entire collection.
Well, in the beginning, he really didn't have a plan. He loved to own historical diamonds, and he probably owned, between him and me to some extent, probably more great diamonds and large stones than anyone else in history.
12 nations take part, and 5,000 diamonds are used in tribute to the United Nations. The Hope Diamond is among the famous stones present.
Winston sent the Hope around the world, raising millions for charity. During its 9 years with Harry Winston, the Hope Diamond's curse seemed a thing of the past.
I don't think he really looked at that. He was not a particularly superstitious man, and he felt it did a lot of good in raising money for charity. I will add that I can never remember my mother wearing it.
Of all the world's most famous jewels, it was the Hope Diamond that possessed both great beauty and a gem of a curse. Purchased for the first time.
In 1958, Harry Winston donated the Hope Diamond to the Smithsonian's National Museum of Natural History. With a flair for the dramatic and unusual, he sent the gem via registered mail, insured for $1 million while in transit.
Neither snow, nor rain, nor heat, nor whatnot can stop this well-guarded postman from making his appointed round. And no wonder. Inside his mailbag is more than $1 million worth of precious stones.
It was also a little bit of a publicity thing, I think, in the sense that it wasn't simply just dropping it in the local corner mailbox. It was taken to the post office, and as I understand it, it had an escort virtually the entire way.
Winston, still forbidden from appearing on camera by his insurance company, sent his wife for the donation ceremony. His dream was the gift of the Hope would start a national gem collection that would someday rival the Tower of London's.
Suddenly it was the center stone for the National Gem Collection in the Smithsonian Institution in Washington, D.C. It hit all the newspapers around the world, and overnight it became one of the most famous gemstones in the world.
Newsreels of the day repeated half-truths and outright myths.
Legend has the diamond's first owner torn to pieces by mad dogs. Later, it was worn by 3 mistresses of France, who all lost their heads in one way or another.
Stories of the curse were once again fresh in people's minds.
There were people who called the Smithsonian who said that this was given to the American people, and this will mean there's a curse on the American people, and therefore you should give it back.
Attendance at the museum doubled. After 300 years of private ownership by royalty, the wealthy and powerful, the Hope had found a home, and some believe one more victim, postal worker James Todd.
The mailman, I think 6 months after he delivered the Hope Diamond, his house caught on fire, his wife and dog died, and he lost both his legs in a car accident. But he says it has nothing to do with the curse of the Hope Diamond.
But the Hope would not sit idle in its vault forever. Royalty of a different kind would once again be beckoning. Jeweler Harry Winston donated the Hope Diamond to the Smithsonian in 1958. The famed blue gem was housed in a special safe. Though its brilliance had been reduced by 25% due to 1-inch thick security glass, its considerable mystique could not be diminished. The Hope Diamond became one of America's crown jewels in a society where diamonds, once only the domain of royalty and aristocrats, were becoming ubiquitous.
Diamonds probably, they do in fact exist in outer space, so they're part of the cycle of man and the universe. And I like to think of diamonds themselves as tangible stars. We can't touch the stars, but we have these beautiful glittering things on Earth that represent them and are symbolic of them.
In 1962, a member of America's version of royalty, Jacqueline Kennedy, became part of the Hope Diamond's history. That year, the Louvre asked the Smithsonian to loan the Hope for an exhibition called 10 Centuries of French Jewelry. But the Smithsonian refused to let the descendant of the old French blue go, citing security reasons. France's Minister of Culture appealed to the First Lady, and she helped work out an unusual exchange. After all, the Louvre had something worth swapping for.
In return, it was arranged for the Mona Lisa to be displayed at the National Gallery here in Washington, D.C. for a period of time. So the two national treasures were traded back and forth.
The Smithsonian courier had an uncommonly difficult trip to Paris, arriving 9 hours behind schedule. After cabling the Smithsonian, declaring mission accomplished, the Hope was reunited with its former companions among the French crown jewels for the first time since the theft in 1792. In 1988, a team from the Gemological Institute of America went to the Smithsonian to examine the diamond while it was unmounted. For GIA's John King, it was a rare privilege.
I always find it very fascinating, those first moments of being able to view a stone under conditions that it may not have been viewed under before, and to have it out of its mounting, to be able to look at it in the microscope, to be able to see areas of it internally with the kinds of equipment that others may not have had available to them in the past.
King, here demonstrating on a Hope replica, verified one of the unusual qualities of blue diamonds. When exposed to ultraviolet light, the Hope diamond shows a reddish afterglow called phosphorescence.
It was extremely strong from what we've normally encountered and lasted much longer than I've seen in any other blue diamonds in which we've seen this. And it is a rare occurrence, even in blue diamonds.
The GIA team graded the Hope's color as fancy deep grayish blue and its clarity as VS1, or very slightly included. That means the Hope, for all its grandeur, is not technically flawless.
No, it's not flawless. Not in the system we would grade diamonds. It's still a quite impressive stone.
Just prior to being moved to its new display case, the Hope once again left the Smithsonian and journeyed to the house of Harry Winston in New York.
Well, it's certainly our most difficult object to move in and out of the museum. Security, we try not to take any chances. It's a national treasure. Secrecy is a big part of that security.
Upstairs from the Winston showroom, some of the finest craftsmen in the country made sure the Hope was in the best possible condition.
Went into the workshop, it was cleaned, and it was, one diamond was, little diamond, it's part of the surround in the necklace, was loose, and I think was missing one old diamond. And we fixed it up, we cleaned it, and polished the setting, and in fact, we took it out of the setting and then put it back very lovingly and sent it back to Washington.
The temptation to hold in one's hand arguably the most famous and notorious diamond in the world is often too strong to deny.
I did, yes. I've looped it, I've held it in my hand. I'm still here.
I did once when it was here, and I had the pleasure of holding it a couple of years ago at the Smithsonian, and it certainly hasn't hurt me at all.
I thought, do I believe in any of this bad luck? And I wondered, but once I saw it and held it, I didn't have any feeling of that at all.
She never tried to talk me into it. I noticed that. I was all prepared. It's so pretty.
It's so gorgeous, isn't it?
What then of the curse? Though much of it was invented, there still seems plenty of true misfortune in the Hope's wake. Or has it simply been the accessory to rich and flamboyant histories?
I don't think there's a curse. I think that diamonds like this that come from great families from warrior ages past basically have turbulent histories. Not the Hope diamond alone. In fact, if you look at the history of England, the history of France, the history of the Sultan of Turkey. I mean, all these people are embroiled in cabals and revolutions and intrigues and assassinations, and the diamonds kind of go along for the ride.
Even aside from the curse stories and all of its human history, it's still an extremely unique and unusual gemstone. One that even a scientist would look at and say, that is a world-famous, unique specimen, regardless of anything else that's happened to it.
Maybe the Hope diamond was just an innocent bystander to history. Or maybe Americans should consider the words of the English poet Southey, who wrote, "And the curse shall be on thee forever and ever."
No locked door.
It is not open to the public.
Or forbidden areas.
We are under the city of Jerusalem here. No one gets into this place.
Can stop the naked archaeologist from finding Jerusalem's temple booty. The hunt for the treasure continues on The Naked Archaeologist. Tonight at 8 on History International.